Welcome friends to another r/MaliciousCompliance video. Today we've got a great story of compliance where somebody's basically told not to do their work. But first, a story from Pikustki. Part-timers can't carry phones? Fine, calls won't be answered. I worked at a grocery store for 4 years. At the time, I was 3 years into this job. I was working part-time while going to school. I was working in the frozen department, which most people did not want to do. I had a coworker who we'll call Karen. She was full-time and older than me. She was awful, and everyone who knew her in-store hated her. Our manager and upper managers hated her and never wanted to deal with her. Each department had a minimum of 2 phones. One was a wired one on our desks, and the other was a mobile phone with a clip. If our manager were in, he would have it. If not, the first person would grab it and pass it on when they left or took lunch. That was standard procedure till one day. I had held the phone as I was the first one in, and I'd been answering the calls as they'd come in. Karen comes in an hour after me. She clocks in and comes up to me. "OP, I need the phone," yelling with her hand outstretched. "Okay, do you need to make a call?" I asked, wondering what she needed this early. "No, I'm supposed to have the phone," she demands, her hand still out. I give it to her confused. "Okay, here. Why are you supposed to have it?" I ask, confused at the statement. "I'm a full-time and you're not. Full-timers are supposed to be the only ones who have the phones," she replies, rolling her eyes at me. Cue malicious compliance. On the next shift, I come in and my manager's not in. I don't grab the phone. I leave it on the charger at our shared desk. I get to work and start my morning duties. I continue to work and talk with people. An hour and a half later, when Karen finally comes in late, she demands where the phone is. I tell her it's on the desk. She stomps off and grabs it. I continue to work for the next couple of hours. At some point, our store manager comes over to me while I'm working in the aisle. "Hey, OP, is your manager working today?" I say, "Hey, no, he's not. It's Karen and I working today." "Okay, who has the phone? I keep calling it," he asks, confused. As most of the time, calls get answered quickly. I say, "Karen has it." "Oh, why don't you have it?" he asks, fully knowing that when our manager's not here, and I am, I have it as I can answer and give solutions. "Karen told me that you said only full-time employees are allowed to carry phones," I replied. They say, "That's true. You are full-time." "I'm not full-time, I'm part-time," I remind him. He asks me to fill ice in our liquor store freezer, as it had been since I filled it less than an hour ago. He also asked me where Karen was because she wasn't in our aisle. I tell him that she's supposed to be in the next aisle stocking items there. I walk towards the back to grab ice. I wasn't there when the store manager got to her, but she had left the phone on the table she was using to fill items and didn't hear it ringing multiple times. The store manager was pissed and told her off for not answering and telling her she should not have the phone if she were going to leave it lying around. He gave me the phone and told me that I should probably keep it on me. Would you guys agree with me when I say that it seems like from top to bottom, there's a bit of dysfunction going on here? If there is this supposed rule that only full-time employees are allowed to carry phones, and OP isn't full-time, and they even thought OP was full-time, wouldn't you guys agree that there's something dysfunctional going on here? Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Our next story is from Umlauts Aloud. Fill the forks all the way? Okay. When I was a teenager, I worked at a bread-based fast casual dining establishment. I was a quick study, a hard worker, and good with the customers. I was also one of the few people there that knew how to work every station. At some point, a new manager's hired. We'll call her Jane. Jane was mean, and she had little regard for food safety rules. For example, she rarely changed her gloves, and I don't recall ever seeing her wash her hands for longer than 2 seconds. No soap. She also had a bad habit of eating on the line. For those familiar with these types of bread-based fast casual cafes, customers can pretty easily see you when you're on the line. Even if they couldn't, you're not supposed to eat there anyway. One night we're closing and she's in rare form. I was in charge of closing down the coffee and condiment station. This included refilling the condiment and utensil cups, which were set into a large wooden block and angles out towards the customer. I fill everything up and start to leave when I hear Jane yell, "OP, come here." I go over and she's pointing at the condiment station. I ask her what was up and she said, "You can't leave before you finish closing down your station." I say, "But I'm finished." They say the forks are practically empty. I then try to explain to her that the forks only appear somewhat empty because we put the prongs down, and the prong ends take up much more room in the bottom of the cup than the handles do at the top of the cup. We fill them this way for several reasons, such as preventing people from being stabbed, and or preventing strangers from touching the business end of utensils other people will be using. I also try to point out that if you put too many in, then the next person to come along will spill forks everywhere because they get tangled, for lack of a better word. Anyway, she cut me off and told me to fill the forks all the way and to just do it because she was my manager and that's what she was telling me to do. Okay, if you say so. I fill the fork cup up all the way as requested, even jammed a few extra ones in there just in case. Because even though the forks will now be a huge pain in the butt to get out, I didn't want her to accuse me of not doing what she asked. I tell her it's done, she's too busy rifling through the refrigerators under the line to care too much, but says I can go as long as the forks are full. I meander out, saying goodnight to people and gathering my stuff. As I'm talking to another employee in the back, I see Jane with some sort of food she's gotten from the line. I think it was a scoop of chicken or tuna salad, but I can't remember and it doesn't really matter. What does matter is that whatever it was, it needed a fork. I stick around just long enough to hear her pull a fork from the utensil cup, which was really the sound of tons of metal forks falling on the floor. This was followed by a guttural sound of anger and frustration. My minor malicious compliance complete, I very hurriedly slip out the door and head home. How much are you willing to bet that upon spilling all these forks all over the floor, that this person scooped them all up, shoved them right back in that wooden slot, and didn't give a crap about anybody else that's gonna follow them up and eat off of floor forks? By the way, if you're enjoying these stories, make sure to hit those like and subscribe buttons down below so you never miss any of my daily videos. Every video has awesome stories like our next one from Ken Knows Best. Loony lady refuses to give up reserved seat and group cabin on a crowded train. Good day everyone. So after lurking on the subreddit for a while, I decided to offer a story my dad once told me about his malicious compliance. My dad was a high school teacher, or the equivalent thereof in my country, and is generally a relaxed and chill guy. However, if you don't follow the most basic rules of politeness and respect, he can dish it out if he must. One day, he was on a school trip with his class. They had booked several cabins on a train for the students, each of which had 6 seats and was a closed compartment. The train was quite crowded, which they'd anticipated, and which was why they'd reserved seats in the first place. Now, most people generally are polite enough to free the reserved seats when asked by the ones having reserved it, or they sit in them until the destination arrives, which is marked as the starting point for the reservation. The reservation on the seat shows reserved from station B to station D. So technically the seat is free until you arrive at station B. However, in one of the reserved cabins, there was a middle-aged woman sitting alone. When my dad saw the lady sitting there, making herself comfortable, barefoot, legs up on the opposing seat, and her bags taking at least one other seat, he politely asked her to move since the entire cabin was reserved for the teachers and his class. Instead of complying or at least politely asking if she could stay, she instantly went into entitled Karen mode and started yelling about how she was not gonna give up the seat, that she was there first, and how it was her right to sit and whatnot. My dad, being a generally chill dude, tried to calm the situation and explain to her the concept of reservation. She did not care and descended into insults while acting like a victim of a terrible injustice. After all, the kids could just sit in the other seats. After this commotion went on for a while, my dad had had enough. He went back into the hallway where students and other people were lining up and picked out 5 boys. He told them to get into the cabin, take the remaining seats, and make themselves comfortable as well. Having heard the conversation before, the students absolutely loved his idea and proceeded to move into the cabin. They behaved like they were alone, blasting music, loudly eating and burping, and intentionally behaving like stereotypical gross teenage boys. A few minutes after the plan had been set in motion, the woman burst out of the cabin to find my dad standing in the hallway talking to some students. Apparently she cursed them using some pretty colorful language, spit on the floor, who even does that, like what the freak, and proceeded to move to another wagon. My dad was way too gleeful to let himself be angered by that lunatic and let her go. This is a story of fighting fire with even rougher fire. I can only imagine that the inside of that wagon was like a Call of Duty lobby meetup IRL going on. This next story is by Indian Joe, how being on call led to 3 times more downtime. My coworker is Apache Bob, HR guy is Cowboy Richard, billing service old-timer is Calamity Karen, and I am Indian Joe. Where I live, appointments with some medical professionals are hard to get. A few days ago, my coworker was supposed to have dental work done. He was lucky to get his appointment in a very short time because his dentist had a cancellation. We're both the only members of our 2-people bureau, we do the same job and are the only ones doing it in the company, and this was supposed to happen during my first day of vacation. He advised HR that he had an appointment, but he scheduled it during his lunch break. It would perhaps make his break 1 hour longer than usual, but given the very low amount of actual work to do, that shouldn't be a problem. And he can also stay later if needed. All seems good. Until I get a call from the HR guy, Cowboy Richard, asking me if I can work on Monday to cover for my colleague. I'm not very happy about it because I already knew about the appointment. We usually check that kind of stuff between ourselves before going to HR since there's only 2 of us and it's Friday already. I plan to start my vacation by an extended weekend. I know covering for Apache Bob, my coworker, is useless. When he learns that, Bob writes an email, standard cover your butt procedure, to Richard, stating that the workload is historically low and that covering for an eventual maximum of 1 hour is useless. I'll summarize the next email exchanges. Cowboy Richard, the HR guy, says, "There must be someone on call at all times, so Indian Joe has to come in." Apache Bob says, "It's useless since I'll be away from 1 hour at the most." Cowboy Richard says, "There must be someone on call at all times just in case. I remind you that is company policy." Apache Bob says, "Again, it's useless since I'll be away for 1 hour at most during the slowest part of the day. I can also stay later to compensate if needed, and ultimately our actual workload is almost non-existent." Cowboy Richard says billing service old-timer Calamity Karen says she slammed underestimates, and that the amount of prep to do Monday will be huge, so we definitely need to have someone on call. See, we all know that Calamity Karen is always slammed with utterly hard estimates for clients from heck. Or so she says. She's the kind to accept last-minute jobs, even when the production team already have so much to do that they're on shifted schedules and maxing their overtime. She'll still leave 5 minutes early because today is her Aqua Zumba, CrossFit, yoga, motionless stretching day. Unfortunately, she's also considered the interim production leader by our boss. So in his absence, her word is law as far as Cowboy Richard is concerned. But there is no way we would be under the water this Monday. We know it, she knows it, HR knows it, everyone knows that everyone knows it. So my coworker does what you all guess he would and answers, "Okay then, I'll cancel my appointment so OP can go on with his vacation. Someone's on call and I can have my vacation. Thanks Apache Bob for complying to the letter of company policy." This fateful Monday, he had a grand total of 3 projects to prep for printing. We usually average 20 a day each. So, you see, while being on a call at all times was really essential, but what about the 3 times more downtime of the title? Well, later the same week, Apache Bob had to go to the dentist anyway since his tooth actually broke. So while I was at home in a hostile place without cell reception, he was gone almost 3 hours, the time needed for the dentist to do an emergency dental dressing. Since then, he had a second appointment to get another dressing that can last until his 3rd appointment in a few days when he'll finally have the initially planned work done. And since it's now a more urgent matter, he's not able to schedule those appointments as easily as before, and they all, unfortunately, happened during work hours. Just everything that went on here was so dysfunctional and inflexible. Is inflexible a word? Maybe I need to send my vocabulary on one of those Aqua Zumba, CrossFit, yoga, motionless stretching days. And our final story of the day is from Do It Again 24601. Don't check emails outside of work? No problem. Old workplace made an oops. For convenience, a lot of employees would install a popular email app on their phone and check their work email on it. Never was a requirement. No one was expected to. Just made it easier to not have to find a computer, limited workstations, to check your messages. Apparently, someone decided to put in for overtime whenever they answered an email off hours. Seems their supervisor made it seem like it was a requirement to be available to work on projects. Good for them. Eventually, it added up high enough to flag in the system. Cue a strongly worded letter from a higher-up that said, "Do not answer emails outside of work hours." And by having your work emails on your personal phone is now discoverable for legal purposes. As in, everything you have, pictures, messages, etc., becomes evidence. Cue hundreds of employees immediately deleting the app off their phones. Shortly after, it becomes apparent just how much business was being taken care of this way. So now, instead of a quick email and a problem's fixed, supervisors have to wait until the person comes back on shift. Text message? Nope. Once people found out talking work via text also makes your phone into evidence, messages mysteriously stopped getting answered. Calls? Same thing. Shortly after, an explanation email comes out saying that, oops, that was only supposed to go to that person's supervisors. And yes, you can read your emails outside of work, but you won't be paid, and please don't put in overtime for it. Ha! Too late, damage done. For the next 2 years that I know of, I left. Every new person hired was warned by the existing employees about this. Enough people kept the email that it stayed in circulation. And now, I'll never allow a work app on my personal phone. Now, I don't know the legality of the whole everything on your phone becomes discoverable in a court case. That seems like a gross invasion of privacy. But I do agree with the overall sentiment that when you're not at work and you're on your off time, I think texting and calling, unless it's like an emergency type thing, or emails for that matter, are just kind of unacceptable. I'm a big believer in being able to just like turn your brain off as far as work goes once you're no longer at work, if at all possible. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another malicious compliance story that was way crazier than any of the ones in this video, click on that left video. Or if you missed my latest video, click on the right. With that said though, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.